Gazebos.
The August 23rd, 2023 meeting of the Union Township Zoning Commission is now called to order. If you will, please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First order of business, Mr. McCormick, if you'd call the roll, please.
Mr. Outridge.
Here.
Mr. Wing.
Here.
Mr. Shannon.
Here.
Mr. Lewis.
yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Here. Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from our July 26, 2023 meeting?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
I've regularly made and seconded motion to approve the minutes from our July 26, 2023 meeting. Any discussion? Mr. McCormick?
Mr. Outridge.
Yes.
Mr. Wing.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Minutes are approved. Is there any old business to come before this commission?
Nope.
I don't have any.
Having no old business to be reopened, I will call our first and only case in new business tonight. It's number 223T regarding proposed text amendments to the Union Township zoning resolution, specifically impacting Article 5 general provisions and Article 7 supplementary district regulations. Mr. McCormick, do you have a case summary?
Yes, I'm going to go through the proposed amendments one at a time. In Article 5, there's only the one section, 532. And the background on 532, Section 532 regarding parking and storage of vehicles and trailers. Slide this down here. And Section 532 is something that the trustees have discussed with the staff a number of times, both in and out of meetings. In the last two meetings, in and out of meetings, it's come up as an issue they would like us to address, the parking of work-related vehicles on residential property, particularly the ones where, people might be wrapping the vehicle, driving it to and from the house for work, or it's a combination work vehicle, combination personal vehicle with like a sticker on the side. Could be the one where they're selling Mary Kay or whatever. I don't necessarily know that their intention is to expand the work vehicles for like big vehicles. I don't think that's the intent. So not allowing, for example, a semi on residential property, or the very large work trucks that you see that have like a utility component to them. And so what we've done is we've tried to rewrite Section 532 a bit. Some of the text that you see in 532 had been drafted previously by staff about a year or two ago, and part of that we're using and part of it we're not using. And when I go through this, if you have questions about, hey, where did you get this from, I'll do the best I can to answer them, because we did kind of piece it together from what staff had drafted previously, what staff thinks now, because I did run everything through the enforcement officer, zoning inspector, and the other planner, because they've been here a while and can attest to things a little better than I can as far as what's happened here locally, what we've done for enforcement or haven't done. With 532, number one, as it exists now, we would propose to strike that. And the proposed number one in its place would read, parking of vehicles accessory to a residential use shall be limited to those vehicles actually used by the resident for personal use, agricultural use, or temporary parking for guests. Vehicles not in keeping with residential character shall not be permitted. The exception to that would potentially be, I think, number two, which would be new text. Everything that's highlighted, bolded, italicized is new text, and if it's existing text, we have stricken it and highlighted it and bolded it and everything. And that everything else that remains is non-affected text. just so everybody knows. Number 2, as proposed, would read, no truck, van, construction equipment, or other vehicle of a business or industrial nature shall be parked upon a residential lot except in the following situations. Vehicle is owned by the resident of the property or the resident's business or place of employment and is used by the resident on the job as well as a source of transportation to and from work. Pickup truck would not exceed 14,000 pounds of gross vehicle weight rating, tons and 20 feet in length with a standard bed, special toolboxes, or cap not to exceed a total height of 8 feet. I think there's a redundant text there, it should stop at 8 feet. No tow truck, stake body, or dump truck may be parked on a residential lot. A passenger van not to exceed 1 ton and 20 feet in length. No step van or chassis van shall be parked on a residential lot without approval from the Board of Zoning Appeals, and this subsection is not applicable for vans that are for persons with disabilities. Item number 3 that would be proposed, new text, in no case shall residential zone parcel be used for the parking or storage of a semi-trailer or tractor. These other items, 4, 5, and 6, are already in the text as they exist. And the other item, and this does largely come with what staff had put together previously. I did make a change here, and the change that I made was at the direction of the legal counsel for the township when I had them look it over. So 7 and 8 were both largely drafted by staff. In fact, they were actually longer than these. Even number 8, which is pretty long, I think what was drafted originally was longer, so we did try to cut it down a bit because they were wordy. Number 7 is considerably smaller when you take the stricken text out. Number 7, and these are to address commercial vehicles on commercial properties or industrial properties, and we don't even have a provision for those right now. No boat, trailer, or recreational vehicle may be parked on a commercial or industrial zone property for a period of more than 24 hours unless such vehicle is owned, operated, stored, and/or maintained in conjunction with an approved lawfully permitted use on the property which allows the short-term or long-term storage of boats, trailers, and other recreational vehicles. The other item, number 8, no commercial vehicle including but not limited to commercial tractors, trucks, automobiles, buses, house trailers, or semi-trailers shall be parked or stored in any commercial or industrially zoned property except for vehicles owned, operated, stored, and/or maintained in conjunction with approved, lawfully permitted uses on the commercial or industrially zoned property. Nothing in this resolution shall prevent the parking or storage of commercial vehicles that are conveying necessary tools, inventory, materials, and/or equipment to a location where inventory is sold or stored in conjunction with business uses, or where labor using such tools, materials, and equipment is to be performed during the actual time of parking. The last 2 were put together, like I said, primarily by staff, probably about a year and a half ago was my understanding, and they were already sitting there kind of waiting for us. These other ones that we have part is a combination of what we found when we did some examination of some other codes for townships and communities, and we were looking for something that would kind of seem to mirror what the township trustees had indicated they wanted. And they also addressed the concerns of the staff as far as from an enforcement standpoint, some of the things that have come up or that they were concerned about. I can tell you that the staff feels pretty good about what's been drafted. Not to say that it can't change, but at least no one's really against the text on the staff level. Again, this would be new language, but it is something that the trustees have talked about a number of times in the last couple of meetings, including last night and then outside of the meeting as well.
So did the exception to being, a vehicle being stored completely in an enclosed building go away as an exception?
You could still store it inside of a building, and we wouldn't know if it's in there or not.
Okay, because that was in one that was stricken, but then it wasn't included in any of the other exceptions, so.
We could add it in there, but I mean, if it was in an enclosure, we wouldn't know it was there anyway.
Right, okay.
I don't see the harm in adding it, though, back if we want to put it in there.
All right, thank you.
So for the limitations on the pickup truck and the passenger van, they both probably should read similarly in terms of if you're going to put a GVR on one, do it on the other as well, as opposed to, we've got this at 14,000 pound GVWR, but then we're calling a van a 1-ton. Those should probably both be the same, really, because a lot of those typically are the same platforms. The lengths, though, are definitely inadequate, because the newest GM 3500 1-ton truck, which is what a lot of people, non-commercial, are still driving, that truck comes in at 267 inches, which is about 22¼ feet. So I would propose we move from 20 feet to 23 feet, just so we don't have that issue. They're out there. My personal truck is over 20 feet, and it's 22 years old. So I would say in that language, maybe we change we could use the same GVWR for both the pickup trucks and the vans, and then on the lengths, the longest current production van being made currently is the Sprinter van at 194 inches, which is 16¼ feet. So if we left that at 20, that should give us plenty of room to grow into that. Just trying to eliminate somebody that doesn't like a neighbor saying, well, it says right here. And there is in that same 532.2, the pickup truck shall not exceed 14,000 pounds of gross vehicle weight rating, GVWR, and then it says tons. Tons should not be there. It's not a word that makes any sense.
Any other comments on this proposed change?
I just have two kind of questions. For the exceptions, where it says construction equipment on a residential lot, if a home's being built or is currently under construction, and the construction crew is parking on the residential lot, would this then bar that?
No.
Okay, so that's excluded. Okay, that's good. And then is there anything in here about vehicles or other things kind of parked over sidewalks? Or is that more of an HOA issue?
On
I'm
sidewalks?
I'm thinking of like, someone has a truck that's 23 feet and their driveway's not that long and they're over the sidewalk
That's really more
or
of
into the street.
a road right-of-way issue at that point, if they're blocking the road right-of-way.
Okay,
Yeah, you can't block sidewalks on it.
No, anytime.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know that that's necessarily a zoning issue at that point because it's in the road right-of-way.
okay.
I mean, temporary, commercial deliveries and things like that of that nature, but for something parked, I believe the police have authority over that.
Okay.
Now, it's really not any different in that situation of somebody parking on a street they're not supposed to park in.
Right,
Right.
agree.
Okay. I see a lot of that where I live. That's true.
Before I continue, I'm going to raise a brief point of order. Mr. McCormick, typically when we've done these before, we've gone through all of the proposed text amendments, we've opened it for public discussion, and then we've made a motion at the end covering all of them.
Okay.
Is that the intention of how we'd like to proceed, or are we going to?
It's a good question.
Or because of the complexity of these, are we going to open for public comment for each proposed one?
It's really up to the board. I mean, at the end of the day, more often than not, in the communities that I've worked with in the past, when we've dealt with a lot of the text, especially when they're vastly different items, we would handle them one at a time. If they were all related items, then it would make more sense to kind of lump them together. And I would say the same as far as like the items in Article 7 that we're going to get to, because some of the items in Article 7 really aren't really closely related.
I agree, that makes sense to me. Does anyone else on the commission feel?
No, I like the idea of going through these.
Point by point.
Point by point, and then discussing them, and that may answer questions for anyone in the audience too, based on our discussion. So a full discussion of the parking and a full discussion of 7-Eleven, full discussion of the following one. Yeah, I'm for that. But that's a deviation, you're right, from what we normally do.
From established custom, but there shouldn't be an issue with that. Now, the natural follow-up for that is, would it be best then to move on each of these resolutions individually as opposed to collectively?
Oh, to make a motion,
Right.
Right.
that depends on our, what we're doing here. If we're just having a discussion, that Mr. McCormick then takes notes and then makes revisions and presents it back to us again, or do we go forward with a motion to actually change the items that are then Mr. McCormick presents to the trustees?
Right.
What would you prefer?
Well, I can tell you out of all the ones that we worked on this month, the very first one is the one that the trustees have pressed me on the most. I would say if we were able to come up with, reasonably come up with something that is acceptable, that's the one I think that they would like to see from what I can say we've worked on. Right now, as it stands, the potential amendments that we're talking about to section 532 would have to do with proposed item 2, second and third items, and the second item is just to remove the word tons, change to 20 to 23 feet, and then remove the redundant in height at the end of that sentence. And then on the third item, make the applicable gross vehicle weight rating, that's in item 2, apply to number 3. And the only other thing potentially that's been discussed is whether or not to reference that the vehicles could be stored in a completely enclosed building as a part number 1 or another item. But, there again, if they're in an enclosed building, we're not seeing them in the first place.
Yeah, I'm good with, I agree, I understand. So we're really looking at, if we were to make a motion, and we're not making a motion now, but we would change from item number 2-II, we would change 20 to 23,
Take out the word.
Strike the word.
and take out the word, and remove the word ton.
And strike the redundant height off of 8
Right.
feet height.
Where is that at?
If you keep reading down or cap not to exceed a total height of 8 feet in height, it should just be, take off the words
Right.
in height.
Oh,
It's redundant.
Yeah. So not to
Gotcha.
exceed a total height of 8 feet.
8 feet. Okay. So we're only looking at 2 modifications. 3 modifications, the 23, removing tons and removing in height.
Yeah. And then in 3 would be changing it from not to exceed, I think it said,
Well,
1 ton.
It's not to exceed 1 ton is what it said.
Yeah, and change that to a GVWR, just to keep it in line with the pickup trucks.
It just matches.
And where's that at?
3.
I, okay.
So it says 1 ton, so they're referring to it as a 1-ton van. But up here, we're referring it to by its GVWR.
And so you wanted to say GDWR?
Yeah, so instead, we would make that, probably the same GVWR. to make
Instead
it-
of 1 ton?
Yeah, just make that.
So
14.
2 and 3 would mirror in terms
Yeah.
of their. So I believe those are all the changes that were discussed or proposed to be potentially changed.
Oh, okay.
Is the van staying 20 feet?
The van, yeah, there's none of them, right now, the longest one being built is just over 16 feet.
Okay.
Now, there may be some of the old 15-passenger Ram vans out there still, but I don't think they ever exceeded 20 feet.
Okay, so we're potentially looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 modifications if we were to make a motion.
Right.
And so at this point, as far as a point of order, would you then, at this point, open it to public discussion?
Yeah, that's what I'm seeking the commission to weigh in on. What I'd like to do is, because these are so complex and integral, and really because the proposed changes to 532 have nothing to do with the proposed resolutions affecting Article 7, is that we go ahead and open this up for public comment. If there's any public comment, we listen to that and have those discussions. Then we close it. We have any additional discussion that's necessary, and then we can go ahead and proceed if there's a motion to be made, or we send it back
Right.
for proposed language changes, and then we can move on to
Okay.
Article 7
I'm
changes.
good with that.
I think that makes, just given the ins and outs and complexity of it, I think that makes sense. I don't think there's a reason why we can't do that, as long as everyone's on board with doing it that way.
I'm okay with that.
Okay? Then at this point, thank you, Mr. McCormick, for all of those details. I'll open conversation to the public, specifically regarding the proposed changes to Article 5, specifically Section 532, if there are any. Yes, please. If you both have sign-in sheets, and then you can.
Sign one together.
Okay, if you please bring that forward and then speak in the microphone. I appreciate you being out tonight. Normally, we don't get visitors for text amendments, so thank you. So, and if you'd state your names for the record and your address, please.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Caruso, and this is my husband, Anthony Caruso, and we are at 828 Wingate Drive, 45245. So, the issue is I just recently purchased a food truck, not a truck, a trailer. I was working out of Oliver's Desserts, and he's an attorney, and this is my deal, but anyway, we do holiday markets all over the state. We have a gourmet frozen specialty food company. It's a small company. Anyway, long story short is Oliver's Desserts had to part ways with where they were. So now they're in Eastgate Mall, and it wasn't gonna work for me. And so the Board of Health, I was talking to them, and they were like, why don't you get a food trailer? And I said, well, that's an idea. And I said, well, where would I put it? And they were like, well, you can put it on the side of your house. And I was like, what? That's amazing, And so I went and bought a food trailer, and I didn't think about, the zoning board. So anyway, so this is not a huge trailer. It's 8 feet high. It does not have a hood. There will be no smells. There will be no noises. There will be nobody coming up and purchasing anything. This would just be, like there's cottage businesses, like people are baking in their homes. This would be on the side of my house, plain white, no decals, no wraps. We would take it, to our shows and sell, and then bring it back. We don't do a ton of shows. They're mostly seasonal. But before I invest any money in a concrete pad and electric, to hook this thing up as I need it, it's not gonna be like all the time. But I don't want to invest a ton of money and then be told, oh, you can't do that now. And in our neighborhood, we don't have an HOA, and, which I like. There are people with campers, and there's people with boats, and there's people with trailers, and this is a work thing, but I'm trying to make it as unobtrusive as I can possibly make it. Like I said, it's plain white, it's not huge, there's no generator, and I spoke to somebody a week ago, and I don't remember who it was, but they were saying how maybe we're gonna have to put it in the back of our yard. Well, the back of my yard goes like that, and the sides of my yards are where, my biggest real estate is on the sides. So I would do everything possible to make it as aesthetically pleasing and, not disruptive to the neighborhood. So, did you have any?
Well, I think also just looking at the exceptions, perhaps if the commission could give us any clarification, I think exception 2I may apply here, as this is a vehicle that's used on the job, and it is a source of transportation when we go to shows, particularly out of town shows now. It has to be obviously attached to the truck. If the exception to 2I applies, then we should be okay. But if that's not the intent, then I think we want to figure out if we have any options here.
It has to be hooked up to, I need a water source, I need electric. So I don't know where I would store this thing to have that capability. It's a pickle.
What's the size of it?
Well, I just bought it, and I should have brought the paperwork. It's not huge. Is
If
it
you
like,
count the base, I think it's 18 or 20 feet with the trailer, and maybe 11 or 12 feet wide.
It can't
So
be
it's
over,
a standard.
can't be over 8.5 feet wide.
I don't think it's as wide as you think.
That's as wide, yeah, that's 8.5 feet's the maximum for anything over that's oversized load.
Well, you can tell we're inexperienced with it.
That's fine. I just sold a trailer just like what you are describing.
Yeah,
so.
so, there's
It's like a food truck that you see all over.
just, but like, no one's coming up to it. It's not gonna smell up the neighborhood or make any noise.
So this is, if I could just add a little, this is a business that Carrie's we've had together. It's primarily hers for about 20 years. We've been in business. We have a significant customer following around town. We're trying to expand other shows in Cleveland. We've done Indianapolis. We've done Lexington, Louisville. So this is a going, concern, and not being able to have this would certainly cause an economic hardship. So that's why we're here tonight, to get some guidance from the commission and
If you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I have a question for Mr. McCormick.
Absolutely.
Mr. McCormick, under our current code, that trailer would not be permitted, but under the proposed code, as this gentleman just referenced, exception I would permit this trailer, if I'm reading that correct.
So I think in the current code, what we have labeled here as number 6 is what's probably applicable, because you're talking about a maximum of one boat, one non-commercial all-purpose trailer. In this case, it is a commercial trailer.
Correct.
But we could potentially revise number 6. Or one recreational vehicle may be stored on a paved driveway or in the rear yard of any residentially zoned property. If it's currently licensed, appears to be operable, if it's a, operable type of unit versus a pull-behind trailer or something. So I think number 6 actually is where we would slot it in right now.
But this is used, it's owned by the resident, and it's part of they're used for the job, and it's used by the resident on the job.
Well, it's not a truck, van, or
Right, you
Or
would
the
have,
vehicle.
you would have to add
You would have to-
trailer in
Oh,
I.
Yeah.
Oh, I
The
see.
problem with 6 in this particular instance is you're not allowed to park on a side yard.
right.
You have to park in the rear.
So that's why you took
So
us to
6
number
is
6. I understand.
Well, the way number 6 is worded, it says may be stored on a paved driveway or in the rear yard. So the way it's worded,
Actually, yeah, with the use of may would,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not shall.
that's probably what you were told when you called, as far as keeping
Can I
it in
speak
the rear
with
yard.
you?
Probably, because I think I did talk to you.
Yeah.
Now, there's some unclarity really about the fact that, okay, can you store this on a paved driveway in the side yard or front yard? Because if you read that, it makes it seem like you put it on a paved driveway, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the rear yard. The other part of that would be applicable to her, or their situation, is that that's considered, do you consider that a non-commercial all-purpose trailer, which is what is being defined here?
Right.
if she doesn't have it marked, and one were to see a plain trailer there, we wouldn't know the difference, to be honest with you, whether
Right.
they had internal storage for ATVs or whatever, people haul in them. I mean, they can be used for business purposes, but they're not always used for business purposes. So she doesn't have anything on the outside of it. It'd be a lot harder to make that argument if it had signage on it, which I think when I talked to you is what we talked about.
So I bought it used, it's 3 years old, and there is a decal that with some heat we can pull off, but it's literally this big. And so what I proposed was, I'm gonna take that off because it's not my decal, and then just get a magnet for when we're doing shows, we'll just slap a magnet up there,
Yeah,
you know,
Otherwise, it would be white.
just white.
yeah. I mean, in that case, you really wouldn't be able to say it's, there, it wouldn't look like a commercial unit, if that makes sense. So if it doesn't look like a commercial unit, it makes it really difficult from an enforcement perspective for us to go out and say, hey, this is not compliant.
We're gonna have other issues with this though, because there's a lot of handymen who use these small cargo trailers, and they're on their property at night. So we might as well deal with that in this now and look at the overall picture. We're not here to stop anybody's business from happening.
Right.
Yeah, let's keep this as simple as possible, though. It does have to be on a paved surface. And it seems to me that a very minor amount, as Mr. McCormick mentioned, an inclusion for privately owned commercial trailers in here covers that. Is that correct?
You could either add it as part number 2, or you'd have to just strike the non-commercial part of all-purpose 6.
Oh,
That's what I think.
yeah, I would just strike the non-commercial. We could have trailer, just
Yeah,
period.
one all-purpose trailer, that's all you.
All-purpose trailer?
All-purpose is a all-encompassing word, or, phrase, so you can get a lot more in there.
Okay.
By the way, I'm tracking all the changes so that you can see them up there.
Okay.
Everything you've given me to change so far is actually already
Okay.
in here.
Thank you. Well, while we're in 6, 6 is, in a way, not drafted with the clarity that I would like, because it's a maximum of 1 boat, currently it says non-commercial all-purpose trailer, or 1 recreational vehicle may be stored on a paved driveway or in the rear of any residentially zoned property, et cetera, et cetera. This really doesn't prohibit you, you could read it as not prohibiting you from parking it on the grass in your side yard. Or you could argue that it really is requiring.
It does sound to me that it's required, if it's in the rear yard, it doesn't have to be paved, but if it's in the side yard, it has to be paved.
You would make your side yard part of your driveway, is the way that gets handled.
Before, was it
So-
in front of the house? And park beside it was legal before, was it?
And if, currently, if you can see it from the front, if it's on the side of the house or in the driveway, it has to be on a paved surface. If it's behind the house,
Right.
it doesn't have to be paved, if you can't see it from the front.
So if, in your case, you would basically make an extension of your driveway down the side of your house,
I would.
that would be
Which you'd want it anyway, I
Yeah.
would think, all right.
We
heavy.
we have a paved driveway.
It's currently parked in the driveway because I only had it 2 weeks. And I haven't, run the electric or done anything yet till I got clarification from, the board. So, are you allowed to keep it in your driveway? I wouldn't, I want it to be on the side because I think it's an eyesore for myself. I wouldn't, but I have a wide enough driveway that accommodates it, but I don't want to get on the wrong side of anybody. So the goal is to have it on the side of my house. I'm gonna take out the bushes, I'm gonna put it up there as close as I can get it, and, hopefully we can do this.
But you would just have to, you'd have to have
Extend
that
it.
paved, that area that
Yeah.
it sits on
So when
paved.
you say paved, I get the whole concrete thing, but concrete's really expensive right now.
Or blacktop.
Could you use big pavers and fill in with gravel in between the big pavers?
So the zoning inspector is actually allowed for people to do that, at least on some basis. 'cause
Is
we
that
have-
right? All right. I don't have a problem with it.
As long
I
as
think
it's
that one of the other
attractive.
concerns, other than visibility, is that if you don't put it on a paved surface, is that it'll sink into the
Right.
Right,
ground.
exactly.
Right.
And if it's in the backyard, it's not as much of an eyesore for that reason either, but if it's visible front and side, then you have the concern about what it looks like from the road, but you also have the concern about, well, if it's there for a long time, it's gonna sink. So you at least want the paved areas to cover the surface under the tires.
Yeah, if it's pavers and gravel is accepted.
So
that
would
sounds-
we
that's-
allow, not we, but I've seen in other communities where they actually just run two 18-inch wide concrete strips, and so the grass is still in between, which to me
You'd have
would
to
be a
maintain-
headache, because
You'd have to maintain the grass.
Right.
But that is another way to do it, and it would save someone from having to pave that whole area. It's advisable for them to pave or put pavers in that fashion, because the problem is if you only put them underneath the wheels, then when you
Right.
eventually do try to move it, you may get stuck.
Right.
So that's why we would say you're really better off having something that's more than just covering all the four tires or whatever.
Do we have a position on the, they have the pavers that the grass actually grows through? You
Like
still
permeable-
cut it.
permeable-
Yeah.
pervious.
Is that
pervious pavement.
something that potentially could be used for something like this? It would be more maintenance, obviously, because you've got to cut it.
You know, I would way rather just have a big concrete pad over there, but, you know, they said it's gonna be about $40,000 to,
Whoa.
Well, blacktop's about the same now, too.
yeah.
Yeah, the
It's
costs
gone
are
way up.
absurd right now.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
If I understand you, if you took out non-commercial, you'd still have the option to use the paved driveway?
Correct,
Or
Yep.
the rear yard?
Yep.
correct.
Okay, so we could keep it in the driveway
Right.
Yes.
as written currently?
Yes.
And you don't think that's gonna change?
If the text that's highlighted there would be removed essentially, then yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, if
Right
you
now, I've
wanted
got
it
it
to go
highlighted.
on the side of the house, then you have to
You
do
would
the
have to put the
pavers or
paving.
pave it one
Yes.
way or the other.
Yes.
But in your current driveway, yeah, it's the same, but it has to be
Just wanted
pavers
to
or
be sure
paved.
there.
Yeah.
So you could defer to, you know, if the business does well and you can afford it later, prices come down and you could do
Yeah.
something over on the side and put it.
Right, but it's great that, we have this option, because this has been weighing on me. Because I just bought this thing, I'm like, oh.
Thank you for the opportunity to be
Yes,
heard. Do you have any
absolutely.
more questions for us?
Does anyone have any more
No, I'm
questions?
good.
No. Thank you for being proactive. Normally, this all happens after a ton of
Yeah.
stuff has occurred, so, no, this is great. This is great.
So this procedurally then, you make the changes, you make a motion, and then it goes to the trustees?
Correct.
Correct. So what will happen after we end public comment on this particular proposed amendment is we'll have continued discussion amongst the board itself.
Sure.
A motion may or may not be made, and if the motion's made, we'll forward our proposed recommendation to the Board of Trustees to consider at their next meeting. And then the Board of Trustees chooses whether to enact or not, or to make their own changes.
Oh, so it's not a done deal yet?
Not this week.
Correct. We're an advisory group essentially.
But if
See,
you
that's a
hadn't
good-
come, we probably would not have addressed that, so it was good that you
Do
came
we
to
stick
this.
around, or are we?
That is completely up to you. It's public, so if you'd like to hear about the upcoming proposed changes regarding chickens and
No.
beekeeping,
We're out.
you're more than welcome.
Beehives,
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
so Mr. Campbell, what, in section 6, you were looking at something that you felt should be clarified more.
Right, so, and I admit that it's legalistic, but the word may is less strong than a word like shall.
Shall.
Shall is a
agree.
requirement, may means maybe, maybe not.
I have no problem putting shall in there.
So if it were me, I'd revise and remove the word may and put shall. So it would read, or one recreational vehicle shall be stored on a paved driveway or in the rear yard of any residentially zoned property, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Just because when you get into may, you can start arguing about.
So shall or will, one or the other. Yeah.
Well, and in fact, sorry, legal nerd, but will implies a future thing.
Okay,
So
all right.
shall is generally preferred.
That's why I'm not a legal nerd.
No, that's okay. That's good for all of us then, yeah.
I just had a quick
So,
question. In 6,
Yeah, I'm just gonna close this section for public comment,
Right.
and we can continue to discuss on our own.
it says, and is screened according to the requirements of resolution for 6. What are the screening requirements for that?
What was the question?
There's screening requirements. What are the screening requirements in section 6? At the very end of it,
Yeah.
meets the setback requirements of this resolution for accessory structures and
Oh.
is screened according to the requirements of this resolution.
Good question. That's always been there.
Right?
So where is screening addressed?
Somewhere in that book.
Thank you, Mr. Outridge, for bringing that up.
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around what this is saying. So they're saying that if you have one of these vehicles parked on the road, on the driveway, that for some reason accessory structure setbacks apply. And, I mean, even before we get to the screening,
Right.
accessory structure setbacks. Well, accessory structure setbacks don't deal with vehicles. They deal specifically with accessory structures. So why is that even here?
Would that be if they wanted, like the previous week folks, if they wanted to add on their driveway pad, and then that got within 5 feet of the neighbor's property line, that wouldn't be applied? Would that be why that's in there?
Well, we already have restrictions on that for driveways and setbacks. So if it's on a driveway, and they have to get an approval to pave that driveway has to be a certain distance from the property line. So that's already covered.
Right,
Yeah.
that wouldn't need to be separately covered here.
I'm thinking that
You just strike everything.
strike everything
Setback.
from from meets on. Meets requirements of this resolution for accessory structures. I've thoroughly gone over 7-Eleven, and it doesn't have any setback discussion for vehicles.
There isn't one.
So I don't know why that was ever even put in there. That's one of these things that slipped in. I mean, I'm open to that, but my take would be to remove from meets the setback requirements on, just to strike that. Otherwise meets requirements for travel on any public or private street or thoroughfare. And, I mean, unless somebody's got a reason to keep it in, I'm open to that too, but I don't know why we have the accessory structure setbacks and the screening requirement there, because if it's in the driveway, you're not gonna put a screen around it, or
Well, what if it isn't in the driveway?
if it's in the
What if
backyard.
it's in the
Parking
backyard?
rear yard.
I don't believe, I've not seen any screening requirements for things in the backyard.
Does the setback apply to that?
Does what?
Would the setback, or the accessory,
No.
setback requirement, if it's parked in the backyard, not on anything? So if you had an RV in your backyard and you had it
could park it right on the
on
line.
the line, that would be the issue?
Well, we have, Well, I believe that that is if it's in the backyard, there could be a loophole we have that I don't think there's anything that covers the distance that it has. Unless we say that it has to meet accessory structure setback requirements.
And I think that was the intention here, but the problem with wording it the way it's worded in that
Yes.
disjunctive way is it's accidentally been applied to both cases, when really it's only meant to be applied to one of those instances, if it's in the backyard.
Meets the setback requirements of this resolution for accessory structure. So it would be treated as, I see how this is being worded. It's being
Right.
treated as, in this case, if it's in the backyard, they're going to treat it as an accessory structure, and accessory structure setbacks apply. Now, and accessory structures setbacks have been modified, or the proposed setbacks are being modified based on the height of the building, 14 feet versus up to 20. And I would think that would apply to the height of the trailer as well. How tall can a trailer be?
There's campers out, or, some of these fifth wheels are 13 feet.
Okay, so nothing's higher than 14?
Trailers, not standardized, because because bridges and
Right,
things like
overpasses.
that, they're trying to keep them lower than semis.
Okay.
And there is a limit on semis, or it becomes oversized.
Well, then accessory structure setbacks cover it, because they talk about 14 feet, and then if it's higher than 14 feet, the setback has to be increased. But in this case, the 14-foot
Right.
height setback
Yeah,
would apply.
I'm not aware of any of the storage facilities down in the area I store everything having any doors taller than 14 feet.
Okay. Then I revise my recommendation and leave the text up to accessory structures, but then strike the screening. I don't know, unless somebody can come up with where we have screening.
I believe it would be cross-referencing 520, but I don't see it being applicable there. I think that if we add what I've added there after paved driveway, so that there's a clear break, or in the rear yard, as long as these conditions apply, and then strike out the last part that says, and is screened according to the requirements of this resolution. By adding that break there with the dash, it's very clear that it either has to be stored on a paved driveway or in the rear yard of any residentially zoned property if you meet those conditions.
I think it
That
would,
screening is referring to inspection. It's screening. I mean, you screen somebody
have
for
to
a
move-
job,
No.
that kind of stuff.
could be.
No, could be.
You may have to move the part that says has a current license.
Yeah, that applies to all.
That would have to go earlier before that, for that to read really well. So let me look at that here. It'd be just removing that text, really.
I will ask Mr. McCormick to read the final product so we can discuss it. Because I can't read it
Yeah, and
from where I'm at.
I'm thinking about a motion. I would favor a motion that approves this article based on the modifications agreed to by the committee and performed by Mr. McCormick, rather than to try to go through and list all of these changes.
The earlier ones are easy. I got numbers 2 and 3 taken care of, because number 2, we were changing 20 feet to 23 feet. We were acknowledging, we were taking out the tons.
Right.
In number 2, item 2, we're taking out the redundant in height. And then we are otherwise just moving the first part that references the weight from number 2 into number 3 as well. So that's all pretty easy to take care of, and that's all been done.
Right.
Number 6, the way I've got it drafted right now is a maximum of 1 boat, 1 strike out non-commercial, and just say all-purpose trailer or 1 RV. And then I've relocated, having a current license appears to be operable. and appearing to be operable shall be stored on a paved driveway or, with the dash there, in the rear yard, meeting those conditions, and then striking out the screening part. If the or RV, I have to strike out the and on that part too. Or it basically says, or in the rear yard of any residentially zoned property, if the boat trailer or RV otherwise meets the requirements for travel on any public or private street or thoroughfare and meets the setback requirements for this resolution for accessory structures. And then that way it all reads well together.
That seems to effectuate the changes that we want
I think so.
to see.
Yeah.
And in a motion, we would simply reference the modifications that Mr. McCormick performed to the proposed changes.
Right.
And we agreed to them as a group, and then those are the ones that Mr. McCormick would forward to the trustees.
Right.
Right. So any further discussion before I solicit a motion? Okay, the chair will solicit a motion on this proposed amendment.
I can work on one.
We appreciate that,
Yeah.
Mr. Lewis, thank you.
Let's see. Nope, sorry about that. Okay, so this is Article 5, Section 532.
While Mr. Lewis is working on that, I will observe that I now understand why these text amendments were not grouped with last month's meeting of text amendment. Getting into significantly more complicated territory.
All right, let me take a whack at this. Before I do that, we're going to have multiple resolutions under case 1-23-T. So we'll call this 1-23-T A. Okay. All right, regarding case 1-23-T, we're submitting a motion and calling it case 1-23-TA, zoning resolution text amendment. Zoning Commission finds that the proposed text amendment to the Union Township zoning resolution is consistent with the intent of the zoning resolution and the Comprehensive Land Use Plan 2030. The modifications being considered apply to Article 5 of our zoning resolution. The amendments deal with general provisions and supplementary district regulations. This commission therefore recommends the text amendments be adopted with the following recommendation. The following recommendation is that the proposed amendments, the modification to the proposed amendments that we agreed to as a group and which Mr. McCormick edited live on the screen of the text, that we are in agreement to those modifications, which pertain to 532-1, 532-2, and 532-6. And this is convoluted.
I would just leave it at section 532.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just leave it at section 532.
Right.
We're 1, 2, 3, 6.
Modifications agreed to by our zoning commission and updated by Mr. McCormick are what we are agreed to and forwarding to the trustees for consideration. That's going to be, and my motion's over. So let's get a second and talk about
I'll
this.
second that motion.
Called for a second. So I've got a regularly made and seconded motion. Any further discussion regarding this issue?
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with how that ended up being worded.
Well, we can withdraw the motion and we can form.
And we can withdraw the motion, but I want to rethink the wording for,
Okay.
rather than something that whoever has to try to read our audio and convert to a motion gets fumbled with. So I am going to retract the motion, and I do want to work on a better wording.
Retract the second.
I was going to say I need to give
Yep.
Mr. Wing's permission because he
Yep.
seconded. So that motion as read is now retracted, and we will hear a second motion.
This is reflecting 223, right? Not 123?
Yes,
Okay.
Right.
case number 223T.
All right, I'm going to redo this. All right, regarding case 1-23-TA, zoning resolution text amendments. The zoning commission finds that the proposed text amendment to the Union Township zoning resolution is consistent with the intent of the zoning resolution and the comprehensive land use plan 2030. The modifications being considered applies to Article 5. This commission therefore recommends the text amendments be adopted. This commission reviewed the proposed text amendments to Section 532 and discussed and agreed to multiple modifications to the proposed text, which Mr. McCormick recorded. Our recommendation is to forward the recorded modifications to the trustees for consideration. That ends my motion.
Before I call for a second, Mr. Lewis, will you clarify that that's for case 223T? I heard 1.
Oh,
23T.
it is for case 2-23-T. I had it wrong in my notes.
With
Do
the-
I need to restate it?
No, I don't believe so. I think we just clarified. It's
Okay, that's good
223T.
enough. Thank God.
So now, thank you, Mr. Lewis, very much, thank you. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
I have a regularly made and seconded motion. Any further discussion on this one change? Hearing none, Mr. McCormick, if you'd call the roll, please.
Mr. Roberts.
Yes.
Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you to everyone on that one. That was a team effort.
I will say that is, if we don't have to pass, we don't have to have all of these go to the trustees. I think this is the one they were most concerned about, although I do think they will have interest in these other ones as well. All these other ones that we have listed are ones that when I talked to the staff when I first started working here, we were high on the list to take care of. Including the ones here towards the end with the beekeeping and the chickens. I mean, it's all of these are ones that have been on the list for some time. Staff did have some of these drafted in some cases, but we didn't keep them the way they were drafted, so I'll go over those next, and those are all in Article 7.
Okay. Well, we are continuing on with 2-23T. So, Mr. McCormick, if you'd proceed with proposed changes to Article 7, Section 711, please.
Yes, 711 is regarding accessory structures. So currently, there is a maximum limit of accessory structures and a maximum square footage for accessory structures. And the square footage limit is particularly low for people to have half acre or more on property. And there's no distinction for people who have larger properties versus people that have smaller properties, or very little distinction. The sheds are currently capped at 120 square feet. For R2, the cap is currently 750 square feet, and for R1, the cap is 900 square feet. I'm sorry, 1,000 square feet. And then if the lot is less than 25,000 square feet, there's a 900 square foot allowance. So the number of structures has been an issue in talking to staff for accessory structures, because this includes not only your storage structures, but this can conceivably include your pool, deck. And the other part of the equation is the square footage, because again, vastly different sized lots in places of the township, so particularly for people who have more property, it's been an issue. And I think those are the cases that have gone to the Board of Zoning Appeals more. So what has been drafted, accessory structures is what the section is currently titled, and we just put in there next to that permit required to make it very clear from the beginning that the permit is required for those structures. Number 1, we are proposing to make some changes here and essentially replace number 1 with what's proposed here. So what we're proposing is that in any residential zone, whether it's ER, R1 to R4, no accessory building shall exceed the following floor area limitations determined by measuring the floor area plus the overhang, which is the way the measurements are currently done. Lots greater than 1 acre of net lot area, 2,000 square feet of square feet. 2,000 square feet, that should be stricken after that additional redundant square feet, plus 500 square feet for every additional acre up to 5 acres of net lot area, allowing up to a maximum of 4,000 square feet. Again, currently, people are capped at 1,000 square feet, so this is 4 times the amount that is currently being allowed.
But why are we capping it at 5 acres? What if somebody's got 10, 20, 30?
Well,
Why?
that's something for us to talk about, because at the end of the day, if you do have 10 acres, are we okay with continuing to increase it? Because theoretically, then at some point, you might end up with a very, very large building. Is that okay? That's something to think about, because they could put it all on a big pole barn type structure, which is a little different than spreading it out amongst other buildings. Depending on where they put that building, that may or may not be important, right? It may be that they have a big piece of property and they locate it so far away that it's not a problem. But, if you start getting bigger than 4,000 square feet for an individual building, that's a pretty good sized building.
It is.
And it's gonna be taller too, because of the span. So,
But our setbacks, you already had provisions, well, I'll let you continue on, we can discuss
I
this.
was
as
gonna
we-
say,
right,
if we can-
so these are, again, these are draft, what staff had, I think, come up with originally, I believe, was 2,000 or less was the max. We already doubled what was drafted. Not saying it's what we should go with, but we recognized in the current staff that we didn't think that was enough. And that's why we've drafted what we've got. For lots greater than 25,000 square feet but less than an acre, we'd be looking at 1,500 square feet. For lots greater than 10,000 square feet but less than 25,000 square feet, we'd be looking at an allowance of 1,000 square feet, which is approximately what's allowed now as a max. And then for all other pre-existing non-conforming residential lots with less than 10,000 square feet of net lot area, you'd be allowed 750 square feet for accessory structure. We propose to strike number 2 because eventually, basically number 2 as it exists now would already be taken care of with the proposed number 1 provisions. Number 2, as it would be renumbered, no residential storage shed shall exceed 120 square feet, nor shall any, we would add, nor shall any residential storage shed exceed 14 feet in height. And I believe, really, that's taking number 5 as it exists and rolling it into number 2, which it would be rare for buildings that are 120 square feet to be taller than 14 feet in height anyways. And I'll come back to that existing 14-foot reference here in a minute because we renumbered that as number 5. Number 3 would be new text, a maximum of not more than 3 accessory buildings, including storage sheds, as regulated within section 11 of this resolution, shall be permitted on any residential zone lot, provided that the combined floor area of the 3 structures does not exceed the maximum combined permissible floor area for an accessory structure as defined in section 11 through .1 through 711.3 of this resolution. We could just say as defined in the section, that would be a lot simpler, really.
Yeah, I would have a preference for that because the more specific you are is sometimes nice and sometimes it's required, but when things start changing, cross-references get off and it's
And we have
much harder to catch those.
We have another issue I'll come to in a moment about cross-references that where if we make this change, we
We'll
need to.
see if it's the same one I've got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
4, as it exists in the text, is already in here. I think it's listed as number 3 currently. Oops. Number 5. Make sure I'm looking at this here. Oh, 4 is the same as numbered now. Number 5 is similar, only we're proposing the text to read accessory buildings not otherwise classified as a residential storage shed pursuant to this section, we'll say, instead of this, not like what we mentioned earlier, these numbers being specific can change, shall not exceed, instead of 14 feet, 20 feet in height in residential zones. And that's just to acknowledge the height of other buildings, not a shed. But again, if you have a 20-foot max height and you're looking at a 4,000 square foot building, as I mentioned earlier, that might, the height is eventually going to be a problem the bigger the building, if it's all concentrated in one building. And then you have to consider, like, well, how high do you want these accessory structures to be? You know, let's say somebody has 6 acres or 7 acres, like, what point do we want a building that's 24 feet tall and the house is only less than 20, right? Something to think about.
But yeah, I mean, if somebody's got 5 acres, and it's 5 open acres, and I don't know how you clarify that, but I could see, you know, you're talking about a 100 by 40-foot building. I see those in agricultural uses common. Now, I do see your point, and I would consider capping the maximum size of any one building. I'm inclined, I believe we shouldn't put a cap on, a random cap, an arbitrary cap at, well, you can go up to 5 acres, you can go up to 4,000 square feet, but not more. I think that should go up with the acreage, but I could see capping the largest, the maximum size a building can be. And maybe the 4,000 as staff and you had decided was a good number. Maybe that's the right number. But let's continue on.
Okay. Proposed item 6. Would read, residential decks, if attached to the principal structure, shall be set back not less than 5 feet from the side or rear property lines. It can be situated in the front yard if the proposed setback was equal to or greater than the required front yard setback for the applicable zoning district. Residential decks, if attached to the principal structure, shall be excluded from the size, area, and number restrictions as established by this section, instead of the rest of that. Freestanding, number 7, as proposed, freestanding decks, platforms, or other similar structures or installations that are not attached to the principal structure shall be considered to be accessory buildings regulated pursuant to, again, this section, instead of referencing these smaller numbers. And shall be subject to the size, area, and number restrictions established. You could say herein, it's the same section. Such structure shall be located entirely within the rear yard and shall be set back not less than 5 feet from any property lines, what it should say. It's redundant. Such structure shall be limited to a height not greater than 4 feet as measured from finished grade. And again, that's for freestanding decks, platforms, similar structures. Number 8, no accessory structure shall be located within the front yard. Accessory buildings shall be located within the side or rear yard. We're adding the word residential. Storage sheds shall be located and adding entirely within the rear yard. Otherwise, that text is, as it exists now, it's just not numbered the same. It's number 7, I'm sorry. That's number 6 right now. Number 9 is number 7 right now. And we're just adding a very end as applicable unless otherwise defined in this resolution. As far as the measurement for from the property line right of way. Item 10 would be a new item for accessory building exceeding 14 feet height pursuant to this section. The required minimum setback shall be equal to the height of the wall of the structure as measured from the finished grade to the top of the wall plate where the roof trusses are attached. So your minimum height, if it's greater than 14 feet, would be equivalent to the height of the structure in that case. There might be a little bit of an issue there with the one I read for number 5. Basically, because you've got accessory buildings and otherwise classified as a residential storage shed shall not exceed 20 feet in height. So if it gets to be, I guess, greater than 20 feet, that's where you could eliminate number 5 and roll it into number 10.
Well, yeah, let's come back to that.
Number 11 is currently number 8, no change there. And number 12 is just to add an acknowledgement that a permit's required for an accessory structure is regulated in this section, to make that clear.
Now, to clarify where that height is measured, that's up at the peak?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. There's no member of the public here to voice any comments, so we'll start discussion amongst ourselves.
All right.
What are members of the commission's thoughts?
I wanted to take us back to the storage shed. Why are storage sheds still in? You made it the modifications to 7-Eleven have obsoleted the use of the term storage shed. I mean, a quarter-acre lot can have 3 accessory buildings, one being a storage shed, but the other 2 accessory buildings can be really anything they want to be. Storage shed has no purpose in life anymore. I mean, why is a storage shed, and to me, as I go through it, it just adds a layer of confusion. If we have 3 accessory structures in a quarter-acre lot, they can have 750 square feet, and that's the maximum, combined maximum. What they call them and what they are, I think we should just eliminate storage shed from the whole discussion. We've got accessory buildings, and a storage shed is an accessory building. Why do we have a special case accessory building mixed in? All the other restrictions, all the other requirements cover the storage shed as a storage shed. Somebody can make it, instead of 120 feet, it could be 150 feet or 200 feet, whatever square feet. Why do we have a storage shed still in there? I mean, that's a legacy that has been in there for years, so ever since I've been a zoning commissioner. Nobody could ever explain to me why the storage shed is a special condition of accessory structure. You're allowed an accessory structure, and a storage shed. Well, why not just 2 accessory structures, and here's the combined area that you can have based on your lot size? I propose we eliminate all references to storage sheds and simplify the code. I mean, the accessory structures cover it. And if somebody wants a 120-foot storage shed, they can still do that in the code. I mean, there's no restriction. I see no reason to carry that legacy on in our code.
I don't disagree. At the end of the day, we kept it in the code because it's been in the code and there was a number attached to it, and it's the way staff had drafted previously. I didn't hear any strong argument by staff when we were talking about it as to keep it in there specifically. I mean, the only argument I can think of is somebody just doesn't want a shed that's above 120 square feet.
Somebody doesn't want what?
Maybe someone doesn't want to see a shed that's above 120 square feet.
Well, but they've already got that with these new regulations. They can do that. They can have an accessory structure that's 200, 300, 400,
Right.
750.
If they just, yeah, it's a she shed, it's not an accessory.
Right,
Yeah,
that's the thing, if we don't call it a storage shed,
Yeah,
then,
so it's kind of like parking a vehicle inside a building.
It's redundant.
It does, yeah, it's not like.
It has no purpose in life anymore.
So if you take out number,
Well, actually,
I got
we'd have to
number
go all
2,
the way back to the R1 code and the R2 code that call for it. The R1 code and the R2 code.
I hadn't gotten to that yet. We would have to fix 613 and 623.
Right,
Right.
right.
Items 2 and 3 and 613 and 623, items 1 and 2.
Yeah, we've got to fix those anyway because it says 1 accessory building.
yeah, even,
And it cross-references 7-Eleven, so they need to all match.
right. So even if we put it through with no changes, those would still have to be changed.
On this one, if you have a lot of changes, I would almost recommend that we don't pass this one on until we have a good look at it. I don't think it's gonna be too tough to sort out, but it might be a bit more than what we dealt with here on the last one.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on this, and I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15 recommended modifications. And basically all dealing with removing the storage shed from the nomenclature and keeping it simple, and then eliminating the 5-acre cap for the size limit, so a 5-acre, a 10-acre, you continue with the 500 square feet per acre, but I do understand a desire to cap any one building size at 4,000 square feet. And that would be easy to cap in. I don't see a reason. I also think we should allow a continuation of a number of accessory buildings. If a quarter acre can have 3 buildings, why can't a 2-acre have 4 buildings, a 5-acre have 5 buildings? Why every 2 acres we could add another accessory building? So, but still, you're limited by the total number of square feet that you're allowed and has to be divided accordingly. Why are we not allowing additional numbers of accessory structures on large lot residential? Why is a 2-acre limited to the same number of accessory structures as a quarter acre? Why? I don't see the reason. I mean, the same reason, you know, we're allowing 500 square feet per acre to increase the volume. I agree with that. I just think it shouldn't end at 5. It should go up. Somebody's got 100 acres. They should allow more, again, with the 4,000 cap possibly for any one building. But the same with accessory structures. If you've got an accessory structure, once you get up to 2 acres, you're now basically a state residential, and they should at least get one additional accessory structure, and then maybe every 2 acres, one additional accessory structure. Again, all being bound by the number, the maximum square footage being allowed for that combination of lot area and building size. I don't understand, and I've asked this over a year and a half of people, and nobody can give me an answer as to why we're penalizing large lot residential properties.
I honestly can't tell you why it's in there the way it's in there for the number of structures or the square footages. I can tell you that when I've done research in the codes, there are other communities that have similar restrictions as far as number of buildings or square footage. I don't know where their numbers are coming from. I can tell you where I have historically worked, and all the communities I've worked, none of these provisions have been applicable, and that we have basically said most importantly, you have to meet a setback requirement. You have to make sure it's not in an easement, that it's not on a road right of way, that it's in the side or rear yard, or that it otherwise is, in some places I've worked where you meet the front yard setback plus 10%. So that it's set back what would traditionally be like a side yard area or further. But on a large lot, you know, what difference does it make if it's 110 feet back instead of 100 feet?
Right.
So I know when I first started working here and I started looking at these things, like, I question why we have all these in here, but at the same time, there may be a local reason as to why people wanted to have storage sheds acknowledged the way they are and capped at the number they are, and then square footage on the property for the accessory structures being capped at what it is for a reason. I can't personally explain what the reason is, what the thought behind it was. My argument is more similar to your argument, is if you make it simple, just say you have to meet all the setbacks, what does it matter? The only other thing that you would potentially be concerned about would be your impervious surface amount, because you really don't want everybody to put impervious surface over their whole lot.
Right.
And in the worst case scenario, what I've seen happen in a community that I've worked with in the past is that somebody put a lot of storage buildings out on their property to the point that the neighbors around the property that was involved in the one case was like, hey, why are we letting this person put building after building after building on their property? And it became like an eyesore because there were so many of them, and you could see them from the road, but I think they were behind the house. It was just, it almost looked like a sales lot. There were so many of them there.
But then our maximum square footage caps that. I mean, they could have, what are they making? Let's say they make 50 5x5 buildings. Well, then you've got 50 5x5 buildings and a 10-acre lot, but it actually would have to be more than that. I'd have to calculate that out. But you're still on 5 acres or 10 acres. You've only got these little buildings, so they're not really impacting the impervious surface of the overall area. Now, if they're all clustered in one area, yeah, you got to prevent tight clustering, and that gets difficult. But I just can't see that happening too much. I do understand the capping the size. I just don't see capping that. I mean, I understand limiting the allowable size, but as lots get bigger, if somebody's got 100, what is our largest residential lot in Union Township? Do you know offhand? Yeah, I don't either, but I know we just had a similar review back in April. We reviewed an ER where somebody put, 12 buildings in a 12, was it 12 buildings in an 11-acre area, and some of those buildings were huge and greater than 20, and yet that was something that the trustees approved and moved forward, converted it from an ER to a planned development, but that was built. So it seems like the trustees are open to increasing the number of buildings, increasing the size that people in those, and the surrounding areas. Those surrounding lots, I believe, were 20, 30-acre lots in some of those farms in that area. So those people are forced, currently in our code, to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals every time they want to build something on their property that's beyond what is allowed for a half-acre property. And what we've done here, and what you and your team have done is great. It opened it up and provided a lot of needed relief to those property owners. So I just think that we need to take it a little bit further and not be considering caps on limiting the number of buildings and the size as the acreage grows. I mean, to me, it's appropriate to limit the size based on the number of square feet you're allowed based on the acreage, the number of buildings based on the acreage, but not to just arbitrarily say, well, we're gonna cap it here. I do, with the exception of understanding the cap for the largest building, but if you had 100 acres and you had a 40 by 100 building, that wouldn't look all that big to me out in the middle of a 40-acre lot. I suspect there's even ones larger out there. But again, in our township, I don't believe we have any 100-acre residential lots. I think we've probably got maybe 30 acres, something like that.
There's a 28 back by me.
28? So we've got 28, probably, let's say 30. So I've got a number of recommendations, and I agree, I don't need to forward this as a motion tonight. I would like to have all of these items considered, and then we can have a chance to review it again and see it. And I may still be interested in forwarding, a motion that includes everything I have, but I don't need to have that resolution, a resolution read off tonight, or a motion made. What's everybody else think? I mean,
I was sitting here thinking, okay, if I bought a 20-acre property and I'm limited to this, realistically, I could split my property into 2 lots
yes,
and double my buildings.
yes,
So,
that's a good point.
it does seem like it's a penalty to the larger landowners. It may be that, if you're going to set a limit to the number of buildings, we may need to be specific per acre. At 2 acres, you get this. At 5 acres, you get this. At 10 acres, you get this. And go up to 30 acres. Anything above 30 acres, I doubt it's going to happen here. But,
Eichholz has a 51 acre.
I'm sorry?
Eichholz has a 51 acre across the street.
Oh, the farm?
Yeah, there's a 51 acre there.
But that's zoned agriculture, I think.
Right.
So that's kind of
It's
open.
not residential.
Right.
Right.
So-
Agricultural is going to be slightly different.
Yeah, I got you.
But yeah, based on our largest residential, I don't see, to me, it makes sense to
scale.
everybody knows what makes sense to me. So you're in agreement.
Yeah, I don't want it to seem like we're penalizing, because right now, we are penalizing people with larger lots.
Yes.
I'd like to see that go away, because I'm one of those people that have been asking for this change.
And you've got an acre, I've got 4.5, but I'm
Right.
talking about people with 10, 20,
Oh, yeah.
30, and that's not me, it's not you, but it's these people are being penalized for having large lots.
That's weird.
What-
PD.
What's your position?
I mean, I think it makes sense to scale with the size of the lot, instead of arbitrarily stating it. That seems to be what would be fair. I mean, the staff, don't get me wrong, has done really good work in putting this
I
together
agree.
and fixes a lot of wrongs, but I would like something more along the lines. And even if it's, as Mr. Wing said, specific, I think that's fine. If you go, it's this acreage, it's this, and just specifically spelling it out, so there's no confusion.
Right.
Anybody can pick up a copy of the zoning resolutions and see very clearly
Right.
what they're eligible to have and what they're not eligible to have.
And in those odd cases, they can always do a
Well, then you
BZA.
go to the BZA,
Right,
right.
right.
But now we force anybody
Right.
who wants to really do anything beyond the bare bones to come to the
Go to the
BZA.
BZA, and
Every
that
time they want
loads
to do
the
something.
BZA up with a lot of unnecessary work. Bill, what's your position?
Start with, we don't have very big lots in Union Township to start with, but I don't think it should be limited, you know. I have 2 or 3, but but I'm grandfathered in 30 years ago.
Right.
Like I say, I don't think it should be limited.
Mr. Outrich, do you have,
Yeah, I'm in favor
Thoughts?
of the acreage kind of suggestions that have been brought up. I think that's very reasonable. That actually was an estate residential property,
OER.
is it on ER?
Yeah.
Okay.
so that's quite large. But yeah, the only thing I would mention in addition is the clustering kind of component, as we've seen in that case in April. That'd be my only thing. I don't know if it's a size thing or the distribution, like distributing it throughout a little bit more or not. I'm not sure. That'd be my only concern, is that they cluster everything in one spot. But if you're on 50 acres, maybe you have something in there to catch, you know, if you cluster it.
Well,
It-
the case in April is not,
That's,
I mean,
yeah.
there were more issues than
Yes,
just the
yes.
number of buildings. There
Yes.
were setback issue, there was all kinds of things.
So-
So I don't know that that's the standard we'd want to.
Right. and-
No,
Yeah,
and
right.
what I'm proposing is a small fraction of what was going on over there. Yeah,
Right,
That
right.
was thousands, 65,000 square feet or
Right,
something,
And I,
in 12 acres?
it's stupid.
Yeah, and the buildings
But-
were huge.
But there also may be some wording in there that we can add about impervious surfaces to acreage. You know, if you've got an acre, X amount has to be, you know, non-impervious.
Yeah, I'd like that.
But from an accessory structure, we limit that now. I mean, if they've got 5 acres, they're limited to 4,000 square feet
Of building.
of building.
But what about all the concrete, like if you have, say you had 4 buildings and you had concrete between all those buildings, and it might be 30 feet between the buildings. Now
Oh.
you're adding your impervious surface.
But does impervious surface fit into the accessory structure section of the code?
It might have to go as a separate section, because at the end of the day, I mean, you could add it in there, but impervious surface would also include your primary structure, which is gonna be
Right.
your house or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it
That
should
gets-
include all on
Yeah.
a piece of property.
And that has to then go into someplace besides section 711, 7, Article 7. That it goes maybe into the R1, R2, ER, doesn't, the R4 is planned development, right? R4 is residential plan development.
They're much the same. I think there
Yeah.
might be some
So we're
difference there.
basically talking R1, R2, and ER. Well, what I can, I can provide you with the list, and I've got it typed out, the ones, the concerns I had, and the modifications, which I'll step through them quickly. So, I'm looking at it in section 613.2, in order to comply with our new 711, we eliminate that word one, so just accessory structures is regulated in section 711. And then I'm for striking in R1 and R2, the reference to the storage sheds, just eliminating it. I don't think it's needed. And then the recommendations, the modifications to recommended changes. I'm looking at 3 areas: removing the 5-acre lot size cap, allowing for increased number of accessory structures as lot acreage increases, and then finally correcting something that's carried us forever, which is the wording that excludes 1-acre lots, 25,000 and 10,000. If you happen to have exactly 1 acre, our code doesn't cover it, because it's greater than an acre or less than an acre, greater than 25,000 or less than 25,000. So I would just update the wording that, for instance, it's 711.1.a, lots 1 acre of net area and larger, 2,000 square feet plus 500 square feet for every additional acre of net lot area. When you get to the items for the smaller lots, so lots greater than or equal to 25,000 square feet, so greater than or equal to 25 rather than just greater than 25,000. And less than 1 acre of net lot area, 1,500, the same, no changes in the square footage allowance, but saying that lots greater than or equal to 10,000 square feet and less than. So that way we've covered the 10,000, you know, and granted, are there any out there that right on the nose, but just, that's just always bugged me, that we never covered those. If you had it exactly 1 acre, you were left out. And then for lots, in any residential zone, the maximum number of permissible accessory structures is regulated within section 711. This resolution is determined by the net lot area, and not capped at 3. An example would be that if for lots less than 2 acres of net lot area, a maximum of 3 accessory structures. What we have today, I mean, what's being proposed. But then once you have 2 acres and larger, you get an additional accessory structure. Then 2 acres later, at the 4 mark, you get another accessory structure. And then maybe it's 2, maybe it's 3, but there should be more accessory structures as the lot gets larger. And then we've talked about capping it. Yeah, if everybody thinks that the 4,000 square foot building is the largest building they want to see in Union Township in a residential zone, then I'm good with that. We could easily add a section that any one building cannot exceed 4,000 square feet. We could add that in there. But those are the things that I'm looking at. And Mr. McCormick, I'll give you this list. And you can then discuss it with your staff, and you guys can decide how you want to proceed with it, and we can have another meeting to review changes.
So I think the best thing to do would be to table this particular item, and I can try to address with staff a similar type of approach in that we are trying to still provide a cap based on the lot size for square footage and number of accessory structures. I could potentially come up with the alternative type of text, which basically says what I said earlier. If you meet your setbacks and you're, you know, located in the side or rear yard, or you're 110% behind the front yard setback, and you're out of an easement, you're out of the right of way, like, you can essentially put what you want where you want, because that is the other way to handle it. And it is not uncommon to see communities handle it that way. So it may be at some point, if we're establishing 12 items, and some of those have sub-items, that at some point you're like, okay, are we making this too hard by putting all these requirements in place, or can we maybe come up with a couple paragraphs that encapsulate everything a lot better? And I could give you that as an alternative to look at for next month as well.
Okay.
And that way you'd have both approaches, and then you could say whether you liked the modified approach that we're using now, or if you like the other approach better.
I think that makes sense to give us options. Before we move to table, just so for the benefit of Mr. McCormick and staff, does anybody have any other considerations directly relevant to 711 that we'd like to get on the record so that we make the next time we address the issue smoother?
I just had one question.
Yeah.
Does the accessory dwelling or accessory units cover ADUs, or is that a separate thing?
Be separate.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not for anything that would include a dwelling.
Okay, so I think we've talked 711 about out, and I was going to ask in terms of the commission's preference, is it preferential to table, or is it preferential to deny this and then revisit it some later
No,
date? But it
table.
sounds like tabling makes
For
the
text
most
amendments, we
sense.
just typically table, we discuss, and if we
Right.
can't, if there's more work to be done, we just table.
And I believe we need a motion to table, unless I'm wrong. Am I incorrect on that?
Is that protocol? I don't think we've done that in the past, but we can do that. If someone wants to make a motion to table discussion on Article 7, the Article 7 modifications.
I mean, I don't think it can hurt us, right?
No, I-
Rather have the
It
motion
would
and call it.
identify that section 711 specifically we're
Correct.
tabling versus
Yes.
the other parts
Yes,
of Article
right.
7.
So,
Yeah, I'll move that we table the discussion on Article 7, Section 711, the text amendments to Article 7, Section 711 until next month.
I've regularly made motion. Mr. Outrich, was that
Yeah,
a second?
Sorry.
A regularly made and seconded motion. Any discussion? Mr. McCormick, if you'd call the roll on the motion to table, please.
Yes, Mr. Outrich,
Yes.
Mr. Wing,
Yes.
Mr. Shannon.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Next item, section we are proposing, it would be a new section.
This is, and I'd be happy to come in and discuss this with any, you guys and your staff, and it's a couple pages, but this is what I come up with on, and
Okay.
it's self-explanatory.
Okay, I'll look at it and get back to you here in the next couple of days.
All right.
Thank you. Proposed new sections in Article 7. The first of which would be Section 718. We do not have number 718 as it is proposed now. And these are proposed permitted accessory uses in residential districts where there would be no permit required. So this would be new text, and it would basically be worded, the following accessory uses shall be permitted in all residential districts with no permit required to establish such accessories, provided that such use is not located within a front yard and is situated not less than 5 feet from any side or rear property line. And that would include number 1, gardens; number 2, firewood, wood piles, provided that no pile of wood may exceed 4 feet in height and shall be stacked in an orderly, neat manner; 3, patios that are not enclosed with roof, walls, or other architectural projection; 4, walkways, stone or concrete stairs, or fire pit areas; 5, swing sets, trampoline sets, or outdoor recreational gym sets; 6, children's outdoor play structures, tree houses, or playhouses. No play structure may be converted to storage without first obtaining a permit, and I have seen that happen before. People use like a small dollhouse and end up putting it as storage. 7, compost piles or compost bins, provided any compost pile or bin shall not exceed 24 square feet in area or a height of 4 feet. Number 8, we have had some discussion about, interest about, was beekeeping, provided that beehives are kept in the following manners. No more than 2 hives may be permitted on lots less than 1 acre. Beehives shall only be kept in the rear yard and shall be no closer than 20 feet to any lot line and no closer than 25 feet to any residential structure on an adjacent lot. C, solid fence or dense hedge known as a flyaway barrier at least 5 feet in height shall be placed around the beehive. Boundary fence or hedge at least 5 feet in height may be used to meet this requirement. No such flyaway barrier shall be required if all beehives are located at least 25 feet from all property lines. D, no Africanized bees may be kept on the property. And E, beekeeping that does not meet the specifications and terms noted herein shall require variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals as well as a zoning permit for approved variances. Questions on proposed section 718?
Does anyone have thoughts, discussion, or questions?
718.1, where it says gardens, is that vegetable gardens? Is that flower gardens?
Yes.
It's vegetable.
It's
It's a garden.
It could be either one, but I think it's more for vegetable.
Okay, yeah, because,
type
I mean,
garden.
there's so many yards in our area that have large flower gardens in the front yard. So, and I'd hate to say you can't, that's not, I would, if we're gonna make it a backyard type thing, I think it would, vegetable garden would be more appropriate.
Like fruit and vegetables.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah, I don't think flower gardens were really what the issue is. I think
Right.
from talking to the zoning inspector, it's more the other types of
Right.
gardens is what I think that we were referring to. This is one that was drafted by previous staff as well, and most of this is the same text except we added beekeeping. I think we might have taken a couple things out.
Okay.
This also is not intended to address what I would consider to be incidental accessory structures. We might have already listed some of those anyways, with like play structures, because at the end of the day, we shouldn't have to acknowledge those anyways. They should be considered incidental, but at the same time, if it's a tree house, do you really necessarily want some of those things in the front yard? I suppose if the yard is big enough, again, you may not have to worry about it, but in a normal residential neighborhood where the lots are smaller, having a tree house in the front yard or play structure in the front yard would tend to be more of a problem. Number 5 is proposed with swing sets and trampoline sets. We have had people complain about trampolines that I can recall in front yards. We we could always remove it if, you know, people feel like it's not a good thing to have it in there, but I know right now, of at least one situation where we've had a complaint on trampoline in the front yard, but we don't issue permits for trampolines.
Right. It's more of a liability issue for the homeowner than anything else.
Yes.
It's an attractive nuisance.
It's very similar to a swimming pool, except you're not gonna put that in your front yard, so.
Just curious, tire swings? Is that included in swing sets? Is that
I would
different?
say it would be included as a swing, but at the end of the, oh, it's a swing set. I mean, that's not really the same thing as a swing set.
We got somebody that's got a tire swing in their front yard that they have on a tree, and I just wasn't
I
sure.
would probably consider that an incidental accessory structure. If they're not even mentioned in here at all, we probably ought to eventually come up with a section that has incidental types of uses and activities referenced, and that would be an example.
Okay.
Also basketball pole, I mean, that was another one we considered listing, but the problem is, you don't normally want to do a permit for those. People put those in the front yard all the time, by the garage and the driveway, right? And so by the very nature of saying that it can be allowed in the front yard, you don't want to put the basketball pole in there.
Yeah.
Then an issue with making number one and changing that to vegetable
Be
or
fruit
fruit garden,
vegetables.
yeah, is, you know, a single fruit tree in the front yard does not.
That's not a garden.
Does not constitute a garden,
No.
right?
Right. No, it would be, a garden's different. I mean, we could reword that a little bit, but it's where we actually have like a defined row.
That's an area that I think we're gonna see change over the next decade anyway, because there's a big push to going back to more native lawns where
Right.
you're allowing them to grow up through the season and they get bush hogged down or cut down once a year, wildflowers, things like that. You know, it is an environmental thing that is being promoted, so I think we're gonna be seeing that as well anyway, so I would say the vegetable gardens specifically, I could see that right now being a backyard thing. Down the road, that may change too.
There's more and more of them.
Yeah,
Yeah, pollinator gardens are
Oh, yeah,
becoming
yeah.
very,
yeah, my
Very
front
big.
yard has got quite a bit of flower garden,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of pollinator stuff, so.
Same here.
yeah, but what we're really talking about with the one is the growth of crops.
Right,
Is what we're
right.
talking about.
Right. Kind of fits into the whole chickens we're gonna be talking about.
Exactly,
later.
we're gonna
Yeah.
get to the chickens.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on 718?
If someone is keeping bees currently, without flyaway on a residential lot, would they be required then to add those things in?
It's already in place. They might be considered pre-existing non-conforming.
Okay.
Because right now, we don't really have anything in place for bees.
Well, the secret to that is if you've got 25 feet clearance from all your property lines, then
You don't need it
good
then.
on that. You don't need it. And you're also not capped at 2 hives if you're in over an acre.
Yeah, this is an R2 lot, and it's a corner lot, and they have 2 hives they have in the back of their wood, like near the woods, in a subdivision. I just wasn't sure.
So what are we thinking on this one?
I think this one's pretty simple.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think we can put this one through if there's any.
I could change number 1 to say gardens for the purposes of growing fruits and/or vegetables.
Or produce.
Do we want to make a motion on this one individual?
Well, I think the problem we're gonna hit when we get to chickens, proposed 719, is that there's a specific reference to 711 that will not have been acted upon. So I think we can discuss 719, but we'll end up tabling it. So I
Okay.
would suggest that we do this separately. If that makes sense for the commission, that's
I'm
kind of
okay.
where I'm at.
Yep.
And I could, I mean, would the motion simply be the same as we made before, that we
I think it's
discussed it?
exactly the same, yes.
And Mr. McCormick recorded the modifications? Mark, I'm gonna need my template header back.
Oh, did you give me that? This here?
Yeah, the first page. Yeah, apparatus type two. That's our sample template.
Our
I don't
templates are
have it
getting more
memorized. I wish I had it
complicated now.
memorized, but my memory's getting shorter and shorter. Okay, we're dealing with Article 7, Section 718. And we'll call this 2-23-TB. Okay. Regarding zoning case 2-23-TB, zoning resolution text amendments, the zoning commission finds that the proposed text amendment to the Union Township zoning resolution is consistent with the intent of the zoning resolution and the comprehensive land use plan 2030. The modifications being considered applies to Article 7, Section 718. This commission reviewed the proposed text amendments to Section 532. We discussed and agreed to multiple modifications to the proposed text, which Mr. McCormick recorded. Our recommendation is to forward the recorded modifications to the trustees for their consideration. That completes my motion.
I have a motion, and do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Wing seconds. I've regularly made and seconded motion. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. McCormick, if you'd call roll, please.
Mr. Outridge?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Shannon?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Motion carries.
That brings us to proposed zoning resolution number 719, chickens as an accessory use. Mr. McCormick, if you'd like to guide us through that, please.
Again, this is a new proposed section. This was a section that actually had been drafted by staff some time back. We revisited that because it was drafted a couple of years ago prior to my term here at the township. And in reviewing what was drafted, we proposed some changes to what was drafted. Particularly, we were proposing fewer hens than what was drafted up by half. Originally, they had drafted 10 instead of 5 for what we're talking about. And I think we made some other changes. It might have been for, I think it was regarding the chicken coop. And I don't know if it was, it may have been the corresponding size of the chicken coop. But the proposed text, we don't have any text right now with chickens for, as accessory uses, and we've had a number of people talk about it or complain about them. And so we're proposing that these be allowed under these circumstances if boards are agreeable to them. So item number 1 of 719 would be on any lot with any resident, I think it should say with any conforming residential zone or use. The keeping of chickens is a permitted accessory use to any single-family dwelling, provided that such accessory uses meet the following requirements. Actually, probably shouldn't even be a numbered item. And number 1 should start where number 2 is. That should be an introductory paragraph. I didn't really notice that till now. And I believe that's how it was worded originally, but when you read that, it really probably should not be a numbered item. Sole purpose of the keeping of chickens on any residentially zoned lot is for the private consumption of their eggs by members of the household and not for commercial purposes. In no case shall any product produced or made as a result of the keeping of chickens as provided in this section be offered for sale on any property zoned for residential use. A maximum of 5 hens is permitted. The keeping of roosters is prohibited.
Well, that's interesting. Where did they prohibit? Why are roosters prohibited?
Roosters are often prohibited because they make a lot more noise.
Kind of like dogs.
Yes.
Well, we
The
permit
keeping of
dogs.
dogs and roosters in some ways is not really that different in terms of the fact that you have some of the same nuisances. But a rooster is like a dog that barks a lot to people, and that they are often prohibited because of the noise.
Yeah, I've got a neighbor with a barking dog that's difficult to
Yep.
manage, and I think I'd rather have a rooster.
Well, if you call it a rooster, you can do something about it.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Well, and they
It's the
also,
size of a rooster.
they fight too. Roosters fight.
They-
I have a
That's
neighbor-
interesting.
I have a neighbor with a rooster.
Yeah,
I
I
prefer
do
the
too.
dog.
really?
Yeah,
You
I
don't
would
have the
argue-
dog that I've got.
yeah.
I would argue that, you have a noise issue with a barking dog, and it's probably just a noise issue that's would be addressed by the police.
It can be, it gets complicated, but you're right, and
Yep,
they do
right.
step right up. I have been in contact with the police, and then there's a lot of progress that has been made.
Yeah.
And you're right, we do have a barking dog ordinance.
Yeah, so it's the same type of thing you're trying to address.
All right. I understand. Just a little levity there.
All these would be renumbered back one because of the fact that we'd be taking away number one as a numbered item. So number four is numbered currently, says all chickens shall be housed in a coop. Move these down here. With a maximum of 5 square feet per chicken and an enclosed run no larger than 100 square feet. So with 5 chickens, you'd be looking at a 125 square foot coop and then a 100 square foot run max. The other thing is if you'd have had more chickens, you'd be doubling the size of the
Right.
coop. And that was another thing that we talked about as a staff. Chicken coops shall be considered to be accessory structures and shall require zoning permit and shall be subject to the size, area, and numerical restrictions required in section 711. I think we could leave that one in there, take out the .4 of this resolution.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, all we're doing is we're cross-referencing that you have to meet the accessory structure requirements, which is what we're trying to do anyways.
Right. Well, and the 711.4 would be a bad cross-reference anyway
Yes.
if we had adopted what.
Yeah, yeah, I think it'd be simple, that we need to just make it, the cross-references specific to the section instead of be minute with them.
Yeah.
The maximum allowable height of the coop shall be 6 feet above the elevation of the surface of the ground. I talked to the staff about this because I'm like, hey, I'm 6'4". What if somebody's a little bit taller? And the argument there was, okay, your privacy fences are typically gonna be 6 feet tall. If we make the coops bigger, they might stick up. I don't know if it's really a big deal because at the end of the day, you could say the chicken coop could be 6.5 feet. And I don't know that a half foot's gonna make that much of a difference. Most people aren't taller than 6'6". I mean, I'm taller than 97% of the population for males. So if you're 6'6", you gotta be probably covering 90% of all population. So if anything, we could increase that a little bit, and I don't think, in my opinion, probably wouldn't make that much of a difference. All the chickens, wait a second, the coop and the run shall be set back not less than 20 feet from all property lines and not less than 10 feet from the principal structure. I believe that's actually less than what they had drafted previously as far as the text. I might have to look at that to verify that. All chickens and coop and run area should be located entirely within the rear yard, subject to the following additional conditions. On a corner lot, the chickens, coop, and run area should be located entirely within the rear yard of the structure and not be placed beyond the building setback line of the principal structure to any public or private street or right-of-way, so it can't sit in front of the house towards the right-of-ways. For double frontage lots other than corner lots as described herein, the chickens, coop, and run area shall be located entirely within the designated rear yard as determined by the orientation of the principal structure to the public or private street or right-of-way where the primary access is located. Driveway, front door. On panhandle lots, the chickens, coop, or run area shall be located entirely within the rear yard of the structure. In addition to the requirements for enclosed coop and run area, the rear yard of the property where chickens are located must be enclosed by a solid wall or a wood or vinyl privacy fence not less than 6 feet in height. Such fencing shall be installed prior to the establishment of chickens as an accessory use. Properties exceeding 1 acre in net lot area shall be exempt from the privacy fencing requirements stated herein. Chickens shall be kept in a coop from sunset to sunrise. All food and waste material shall be stored in tight-fitting containers and located a minimum of 20 feet from all property lines and placed entirely within the rear yard. I mean, that would be an exception for when they're actually setting out the trash. And I would also say with some of these items, it's really, if we enact some of these, it's a matter of being able to prove that these are a problem. Because some of these are gonna be difficult to prove, and then the question then it becomes like, if it's really difficult to prove, do we even wanna put it in there or not? Number 11, I think you wouldn't want this to happen anywhere, maybe outside of a industrial area or ag area, would be the slaughtering of chickens is prohibited. Right now, it just says for residential district, which I think should be clear anyways. For the
Also
state-
difficult to prove, though.
Yeah, the ER areas would be a little different because you're gonna have some properties that would then qualify for agricultural according to the state regulations. Particularly the ER districts, that's probably gonna come up more. Again, you'd have to be able to show that it's happening.
Right.
That's the other part of it. Chickens in their enclosures shall be kept in neat, clean, sanitary condition, free of offensive odors, excessive noise, or other condition that would constitute a nuisance. Any condition in violation of the subsection shall constitute a violation under section 720 of this resolution. That is everything. Like I said, number 1, I would probably take out the number and renumber everything from there. Item number 4 is labeled right now. We'll get rid of the 711.4 reference and just reference section 711. I don't know that the first part of what I read on what is currently labeled number 1 would have to be different than what we've got drafted.
All right, so we'll open it up to discussion regarding chickens. Does anyone want to go first?
One thought, playing devil's advocate. I've seen chicken coops all my life and runs and whatnot, and they tend not to be built as sturdy structures in these small ones in this environment. When somebody chooses, or the foxes or coyotes choose for them, that they are no longer going to be chicken owners, and these coops just sit back there and rot to the ground, should we have anything, can we have anything in there? You know, basically, once you have no chickens, you know, something has to be done with this. I could see them becoming eyesores in a lot of these areas.
But they're only allowed in
Rear yards.
rear yards.
Yeah. But we're not, you know, I mean, if we're looking at, and you've got to have a privacy fence if it's under an acre.
Yes. So nobody sees it, really.
Yeah, it's just based on what I've seen in my travels all over. Chicken coops tend to
I mean, it's kind of like a dilapidated accessory building.
Yes,
What-
correct.
What do we do now, Mr. McCormick, with dilapidated accessory structures?
You could potentially go after them for unsafe building purposes. A lot of times that's gonna be probably more of a building code issue than a zoning code issue. I'm thinking if we wanted, we could add a reference in here to what is currently labeled item number 12. We already have a reference stating that chickens in their enclosures shall be kept in neat, clean, and sanitary condition, free of offensive odors. You could just add in there, past sanitary condition, shall be kept in neat, clean, sanitary condition, maintained. Structurally, in a
Structurally
sound
maintained?
manner or something like that.
Yeah, that's all you would have to add because it lists chickens and their enclosures, so regardless of whether there's
Right.
chickens or not, that works.
Right. Structurally maintained.
I see the Easter duck syndrome. And people are like, we can now have chickens, so we're gonna do this. And then, you know, it's why I would never have chickens. I've got so many coyotes and foxes in my property, that it'd be the most expensive eggs in the world, because I'd have to build a Fort Knox coop.
Sure, and a raccoon's bad.
And the raccoon, and the
Oh,
black
yeah.
snakes, and, yeah, I mean, there's so many skunks,
You're right.
yeah.
They all prey on the chicken.
So, you know, that's my only thought, is we end up having people do this on a whim, build these structures, abandon them,
Right.
or try to convert them into something else without permit.
It's an Easter time thing.
Yeah,
Do
I've never
people
had
put
it.
electric fences around chicken?
some do,
coops? Yeah?
yeah. I mean, I've got friends that are on thousands of acres down south, and they have, you know, not only the coyotes and the foxes, but they've got the rattlesnakes and everything else. They actually have dug out and gridded the whole underside because of all the burrowing critters that come up underneath. It's not uncommon to go into and these are bigger areas
Yeah.
because they're agricultural, but you know, you gotta be careful sometimes sticking your hand down in the nest when the hen's on it, because you may find a rattlesnake in the nest as well.
Wow.
Not that we have those worries here, but again, it's just, I've been around chicken coops enough to know there's a lot of potential for having angry neighbors. And I'm okay with people having chickens, so,
A lot of kids have bandies.
yeah.
So any concern with the fact that no matter how large your property, your residential property is, you are capped at 5 hens?
That was something I was thinking about. I've never had hens. So how many eggs will a typical hen lay in a day?
Right.
And so that goes back to okay, if I have a family of 10, not common anymore, but I could theoretically be using 20 to 30 eggs a day. The restriction that they can't be sold would probably keep some people from having too many, because most people don't like to throw things away that they've, you know, bought or made themselves, or, you know, produced. But I don't know based on I don't know what an average production is. So is
One a day.
5? How
It's
many?
one a day.
One a day? So that's 5 eggs a day.
That's a good hen.
Okay. So maybe
For a
5 is,
family, that's not a lot.
that's not a lot per family. So are we going to get into that more so because we're saying you can have them, and then we've got people coming back saying, well, yeah, but you're excluding larger families.
Or what about graduating it based on lot size, like we were talking, you know, with the accessory structure? Could there be a graduation for lot size? Would that make sense?
There could be, but the only counterbalance we want there is because this is residential, we don't
Right.
want them farming eggs for commercial.
Right.
But what
absolutely.
about how does it play in it? I know that this happens a lot. Somebody in Waynesville I know has this, where there's a co-op, where there's a neighborhood and somebody has chickens,
Right.
and everybody can go and they can collect the eggs as they need them for their family. Another family has a big garden with 10 tomato plants, and people go and get the tomatoes from there. And so there's like 10 families that share all these different things, and we don't have any provision. I mean, that's not commercial usage, so that could be done, and I wouldn't discourage that. But I do see that you'd have to have a larger lot to have
Yes.
more
Oh, yeah.
more hens, so maybe, we're probably gonna end up tabling this because of the reference to 7.
Yeah, my concern with, if we move it forward, regardless of any other concerns, is that it directly references
Yeah.
7-Eleven. If 7-Eleven's about to change
Right.
in the
So
future,
we
then
probably
we
have to
should do
table
it.
it anyway.
Right.
Do you wanna consider a graduated, like with accessory buildings, where the more acreage you've got, the more hens you could have?
I guess the question there would be, what would be the cutoff because what we're talking about is having chickens as an accessory use. At what point are they no longer an accessory use?
Right.
Right, correct.
Because first of all, you're to your point about, okay, if they are 5 and they're only producing 5 eggs a day, over a week, that's 35 eggs. Most people don't eat 35 eggs a week. And if you have a big family, unless you're baking a lot, that's still a lot of eggs, right? It's like 3 dozen eggs, pretty much. Do you know very many people eat 3 dozen eggs during a week, or use 3
I
dozen
don't know
eggs
of
during a week?
anybody, but if you're doing the co-op, what do you do?
Well, co-op's a different animal, right? Because at that point, what we're talking about is chickens as an accessory use for an individual house.
Residential,
What
yeah.
you're talking about is the neighborhood using one person's property for something that's not the same thing.
Yeah,
But it's not for sale.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's not the same thing as one group of people have for their own use, having 5 chickens.
I see your point.
A lot of people raise these chickens to eat,
Yeah.
not just.
But you can't butcher them.
Right.
Not on your own property.
Not your
And-
property.
Yeah.
You could
You gotta
take
take them to the neighbors and
Well,
butcher 'em.
a lot of people who do keep meat birds, they'll take them somewhere else and have them
Yes.
properly
Oh, is that
processed.
right?
Yeah, a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
people don't butcher their own.
Right.
They'll buy them, they'll raise them, and then they'll take them and have them
Oh,
processed.
Okay.
We would never be able to do that. My wife will name every one of them.
Well, yeah, it's a personal.
I'm thinking in my mind of I know this is kind of off top, or it's related in a way, but off topic, but I'm thinking of that scene in is it Christmas Story where they go to eat your Christmas dinner at the
Yes.
Chinese place. Somebody would just drive to a commercial lot, chop its head off, and then drive all the way back to the house.
Yeah.
But it wasn't on our property.
Yep.
You know, we can't just limit this to chickens. You got turkeys, you got ducks.
I can honestly say, though, we haven't had anybody that I can recall
That's
really impress
interesting.
us about the other types of birds like the turkeys or ducks, and that applies both to Union Township and also where I've worked elsewhere. The chickens is the thing that people have hammered on over and over again.
Right.
I've not had a single person ask me about ducks or turkeys. I have had commercial users of those
Yep.
contact us, but I've never had an individual person say, hey, I have turkeys I want or ducks I have. I mean, this is,
There's a
the
number
questions
of,
all are for chickens.
yeah. There's a number of larger ponds back in my area, and periodically you'll see white ducks on the ponds.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody back there is cultivating them for eggs. And, yeah, and I would say no to turkeys on residential property. Without that exemption, you know, that's what the BZA is for. They can always say, yeah, you can do it.
Yeah.
So other than acreage considerations that I can talk about with the staff, are there other things, since we're looking at this maybe being revisited at the next meeting, are there other items also that you would like for us to take a look at?
Yeah, I see in number 4, we're regulating maximum sizes, but we may want to put minimums in there, just to make sure that people aren't shoving their 5 hens into as small
Into a milk
a
crate.
coop as possible.
Oh.
And there are various standards, I can't cite
Well,
them off my head,
did we-
regarding if you're raising organic, they have to have an increased size
Right.
in the coop.
Although organic is really more of
Well,
just
it's
a
more
commercial
commercial,
label.
but
Yeah.
I'm just using it as an example.
Right.
That's a good point.
So the staff may want to investigate mandatory minimums in terms
Okay.
of coop size and run size, just to make sure that
And-
no animal abuse is occurring.
A lot of people let these chickens graze. They don't have them in enclosed.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Yeah.
true. That's what a lot of people do. A lot of people will use it to manage grass.
Yes.
A lot of people get sheep for that reason. They think it'll work.
Yeah, with the increase in the coyote population in this area, I think if you have free-range chickens, you're not gonna have them long.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Unless you've got a military barbed wire
Right,
enclosed.
right.
I can tell you, even with the privacy fence, I dated someone here, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, who had chickens. She had a privacy fence around her backyard, had a coop on top of that. And she at one point asked me to help her clear some of the vegetation around the top part of the fence, which I did. I'm not allergic to poison ivy. It's like the only thing in the world I'm not allergic to, and I helped pull all that off. And it looked good. The problem then became the yard was exposed above, and the
Hawks.
chickens started to disappear. And she was in Indianapolis,
Yeah.
in an urban area, the Broderville area.
Wow.
And they disappeared one at a time, so, I mean, there's gonna be more than just the coyotes going after them.
Oh,
If they're
there's
not-
so many predators, it's,
Right.
that's why I've always told my wife, no. It's just the cost to keep those birds alive with all the predators we have in this region. And, you know, I mean, you've got the owls, you've got all of the birds of prey, honestly. And even the crows, I've been told
Really?
periodically will pick on the smaller chickens.
Oh, how about,
So I've never seen that. That's what I hear from the people down south, so. They also have bald eagle down there,
Yeah.
numerous bald eagles that attack their chickens, so.
So I know one, whatever it was, it took the head off the chicken, left the whole body there. I'm assuming that was maybe something else.
That's actually an owl,
At the now.
yeah. An owl, it does the same thing to a rabbit. It will come down, kill the rabbit, take the head and leave.
wow.
That's an owl.
one time we just found feathers. I mean, that's in an urban area, so I
Yeah.
can only imagine, this is more of a suburban and sometimes rural area.
Right.
I mean, it's gonna be, we have urban areas, but it doesn't really get denser other than like the multifamily areas than where she was at, because
Right.
I think her lot might have been, it was less than 2/10 of an acre. Because I
Right.
mean, I know what I owned, the last two houses, what she had was that size or smaller.
Strange
So-
things happen.
Well, this year, 36 years here, and we've had all the predators we've discussed, but we just got a new one this year. We've got a badger now. And I have not seen a badger in 36 years. until
There's
this year.
a neighbor of mine up closer to, south of my house, closer to Old 74, got a picture of a bobcat on his game camera
Really?
this year. Yep.
I've not seen that.
Those two, I would think, would definitely take care of chickens.
Yeah.
Oh, everything likes to eat chickens.
So
So do we want to just go ahead and make a motion
I
to
was going to
table
say,
this?
if no
Yeah.
one else has any point that they'd like to bring up just for discussion on the record so that staff has
What
it
about the height?
referenced.
I was curious about if you were, since it's at 6 feet, are we good with 6 feet, or are we going a little bit higher
On
to
the
allowance?
coop height,
Yeah,
the difference between 6 and 7 feet, to me, doesn't seem to be significant. When we're talking accessory structures up to 20 feet, I would say go 7 feet, and then a 6'5" guy can walk in there.
okay. I was just thinking like for myself and everybody that's over 6 feet tall, like you can't stand up in there, which is,
Right.
Yeah, good point.
you know, I mean,
Yeah,
I think
no,
even someone who's 6 foot or 6'1", that affects a lot more people
Right.
than guys that are a little bit taller,
Well, and if you have a maximum height of 6 feet, that doesn't, your interior height is not 6 feet,
right?
so.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Then I think I'll solicit a motion.
I'll move that we table the discussion on section 719 of Article 7 until next month's meeting.
Second,
I'll second if nobody else wants to.
regularly made and seconded motion to table discussion on 719. Mr. McCormick, if you'd call, any discussion? Mr. McCormick, if you'd call the roll.
Mr. Outrich?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Shannon?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I believe that concludes all the business. Is there any other business?
I do not have any.
I'll ask for a motion to adjourn
Nobody wants to leave.
from anybody.
We had such a spirited discussion
It's
today.
great. It's very, very productive meeting, but all good things must end.
I will make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second it.
I'm regularly made and seconded motion that we adjourn this meeting. Mr. McCormick, if you'd call the roll.
Mr. Outrich?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Shannon?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes, we are adjourned at 9:17 PM. Thank you, everyone.